What if I told you a band named themselves after a notorious accused killer and then found themselves surrounded by actual death? They built a career on shock rock and fake blood, only to have real tragedy strike not once, but 3 times, taking key members in violent, sudden ways. They courted controversy with a name, but the universe seemed to answer with a darkness that they never asked for. Here's how Gimmick became a grim reality.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
So you got these 2 brothers in the early 80s, Gregory Hargis and Joey Scott. They're living in LA, a city overflowing with dreamers trying to make it in the music scene. Gregory, the older one, has this wild idea for a band. Not just any band, but this full-blown theatrical spectacle. He's thinking Alice Cooper, Kiss, but with this harder, heavier, more metallic edge. He knows that in a city crowded with musicians, you need more than just songs. You need a hook, something to grab people by the throat and make them pay attention. So he starts brainstorming names, looking for something that screams danger, controversy, maybe even a little bit of history. And he lands on a name that's both instantly recognizable and dripping with macabre folklore, Lizzy Borden. It's perfect. It's a reference to the infamous woman from Fall River, Massachusetts, who was accused and acquitted of hacking her dad and stepmom to little pieces using an axe in 1892. And the name itself is a story, a prepackaged piece of American Gothic horror. Gregory decides to not just name the band Lizzy Borden, but to become Lizzy Borden himself, adopting the persona as his own stage name. His brother Joey would be on the drums, and they'd build a whole show around this concept of murder, mayhem, and metal. So they put an ad out looking for bandmates who are into the same theatrical heavy sound. They get a response and form the first lineup of the band. That's 1983, and the Sunset Strip is about to explode with glam and hair metal, but Lizzy Borden is aiming for something different. They're not just about big hair and power ballads. It's more about this performance, a show. Their song, Rod of Iron, gets picked up for a compilation album called Metal Massacre 4, put out by a new label called Metal Blade Records. That's a huge deal. The compilation series was a launching pad for bands like Metallica and Slayer. Getting on it puts them on the map almost overnight. So Metal Blade signs them, and in 1984 they released their debut EP, Give 'Em the Axe. The title alone tells you everything you need to know about their direction. They're leaning hard into the whole axe murderer theme. The live shows start getting wild. Lizzy, the frontman, is this whirlwind of energy. It's got multiple costume changes, masks, props, and the centerpiece of the show becomes a mock execution. They'd bring a woman on stage, and Lizzy, with this whole prop axe thing, would act like he was using it, spraying the front rows with fake blood, pure shock rock, designed to get a reaction, and it worked. People were talking. They became that band that you just had to see live. The music was a solid slab of American heavy metal, influenced by giants like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, but with this melodic, anthemic quality that fit right in with the times. So they released a full-length album, Love You to Pieces, in 1985, and follow it up with a live album, The Murderous Metal Road Show, which really captures the energy of their stage act. By this point, they've solidified what many consider the classic lineup. They brought in a guitarist named Alex Nelson, who replaced the original guitarist, Tony Matuszek. Nelson's a creative force, a guy who, according to Lizzy himself, could just make things happen. He was the fun-loving counterpoint to Lizzy's more business-like approach, the one who could break down walls and get everybody to loosen up. At things, they're moving fast. They released another studio album, Menace to Society, and then in 1987, they hit their commercial peak with Visual Lies. The album has a slightly more polished, radio-friendly sound, and the single, Me Against the World, gets a bit of traction. It even gets featured in a cult horror movie called Black Roses. The band is featured prominently in Penelope Spheeris' documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, which captures the excess and absurdity of the LA metal scene. They're seen rehearsing. Lizzy gives this infamous interview where he's drinking what he claims is blood from a skull-shaped chalice. It's all part of the act, the carefully constructed image of a band that lives on the dark side. But behind the scenes, the first cracks are starting to show. Guitarist Joe Holmes, who joined for Visual Lies, leaves to join Ozzy Osbourne's band. A huge step up that shows the level of talent Lizzy Borden was attracting. The music scene is also starting to shift. The late 80s see the rise of thrash metal, and by the early 90s, grunge is about to wash over everything, making the theatrical, image-conscious bands of the 80s seem like dinosaurs. In 1989, they released what many fans consider their masterpiece, Master of Disguise, and it's a concept album. a full-blown rock opera that's more theatrical and complex than anything they'd done before. It's ambitious and a cult classic, but it doesn't stop the changing tides of the music industry. As the 90s roll on, the band's activity slows down. The lineup, which had been a revolving door from the start, becomes even more unstable. In 1996, after the departure of 2 more guitar players, the band essentially goes on hiatus. Lizzy and Joey Scott form a new, more straightforward glam band called Diamond Dogs, which later becomes Starwood. It seems like the Lizzy Borden story might be over, but he can't keep a good showman down. In 1999, the band reforms Lizzy, Joey, bassist Martin Anderson, and the return of guitarist Alex Nelson, and they feel re-energized. They play a massive show at the Wacken Open Air Festival in Germany to 35,000 people, release a new album called Deal with the Devil in 2000. The album art is done by Todd McFarlane, the creator of the comic book character Spawn, which is a huge find and shows the band still has that cultural pull. It feels like a real comeback. They tour the world. Seems like Lizzy Borden is back in business. And then the curse of the name starts to feel a little bit too real. On May 17, 2004, Alex Nelson, the guitarist who had been with them through the classic years and the comeback, is taken out in a head-on car collision. He was only 41 years old, and the band was just totally devastated. Lizzy Borden, the frontman, later said that Nelson was the most talented musician he ever worked with. He was a dude who has a special connection with everybody. And it was really the loss of a brother, the heart of their creative unit. And to the band, unable to recover from the blow, they ended up disbanding shortly after. And the name Lizzy Borden, once a source of shock and notoriety, is now associated with a very real, painful tragedy. And the story could have ended there. It would have been a sad but understandable conclusion. But a couple years later, in 2006, Lizzy Borden decides to give it another go. So he and his brother Joey regroup with a new guitarist and release the album Appointment with Death in 2007. In hindsight, the title feels eerily prophetic. The album's a tribute to all the fallen rock stars, a meditation on mortality from a band that had now experienced it firsthand. They start touring again, playing festivals in Europe and the US. Their stage show is as theatrical as ever, but the darkness is not done with them. On January 24, 2009, another former guitarist, Corey James Daum, who had been with the band since the early 90s, is also taken out in a car accident. He was only 39. It's another shocking, senseless loss. 2 former guitarists, both dead in car crashes within 5 years of each other. Starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like this cruel pattern. And the name Lizzy Borden, chosen for its connection to a century-old murder case, now seems to carry this modern-day curse. The fake blood and prop axes of their stage show are a pale imitation of the real-life tragedy that seems to follow the band. The band pushes on, but the shadow of these losses hang over them. They continue to tour, launching a Summer of Blood tour and a Death Takes a Holiday tour, titles that take on a much darker meaning given their history. The lineup continues to change. Guitar players come and go. Dario Lorina joins and then leaves to play with Black Label Society. So it's a constant state of flux, with the only consistent members being the 2 brothers who started it all, Lizzy and Joey. And then, in February 2021, tragedy strikes again. Tony Matuzek, the band's original guitarist from the very first lineup, passes away. That makes 3 former guitar players all gone too soon. And it's a staggering amount of loss for one band to endure. The name Lizzy Borden, which started as a clever marketing gimmick, is just this constant reminder of the real people who are part of this journey and are no longer here. And the irony is thick. The band that built its identity around this fictionalized version of death and violence becomes a magnet for the real thing. Fans who came for the spectacle of a mock beheading on stage were unknowingly watching a group of musicians who were dealing with these life-altering grief instances off stage. The line between performance and reality had blurred in the most brutal way possible. In interviews, Lizzy Borden has talked about the collapse of the music industry in the 2000s as the reason for the long hiatuses between albums. And it's true, the entire model of making and selling music changed. And it was hard for a band from that era to find its footing. But it's impossible to separate that from the personal tragedies they went through. How do you keep the show going when people you started it with are gone? How do you sing songs about death and the devil when you've looked real death in the face, not as a character in a song, but as an actual devastating personal loss? So Lizzy Borden, they set out to shock people, and they definitely succeeded. But the most shocking part of their story is not the fake blood or the axe-wielding antics. It's that heartbreaking reality that unfolded behind the curtain. A string of tragedies that gave their macabre name a weight that they could have never imagined when they were just a couple kids in LA trying to make a name for themselves. To my subscribers, you are awesome. If you haven't subscribed yet, smack that damn subscribe button and the like button. By the way, the like button will make a musical note sometimes if you smack it right. Join the family, and thank you for watching.